Stay away.
Give me the bat.
Stay away from me.
Give me the bat.
Craig, stay away from me.
Stop swinging the bat.
Get down.
Give me the bat.
Get away from me.
David.
Go away.
Give me the bat.
Go away.
Give me the bat.
And scene.
That's the best thing I've ever seen.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
Are you not entertained?
Here's Johnny. I'll be back.
It's not the guitar, it's a silly movie voice.
Well, good movies. Welcome. Before this Halloween-themed edition of Well Good Movies, Mr. Oscar has asked to provide a friendly warning. This classic horror movie-themed podcast shall delve down into the very depths of human spookiness. It will thrill you. It may shock you. It may even horrify you. Here is Mr. Oscar himself.
Hello and welcome to Well Good Movies. I'm kind of creeped out right now. I don't know about the rest of you guys.
I don't know. The organs aren't helping.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're just putting ourselves in the atmosphere of horror. I was gonna have a set of like fake vampire fangs just to do a sort of like try and speak it in and just chuck them out because those things are never comfortable to wear. But yeah, I decided against it. Welcome to Well Good Movies, guys. Today is our Halloween special. Cue. Yeah, that's exactly what we want.
Boo.
Yeah. So today we've got a really scary and interesting episode for you. We're going to be looking at those classic horror films that have influenced generations of peoples and characters and media. So we're going to be looking at the likes of like Frankenstein, Dracula, Creature from the Black Lagoon, and another one which I'll keep a bit more of a mystery, just because I think it's quite a fun one with that one, and I know that Craig had an interesting experience watching it. So what better to go through those sort of like fantastical horror films than two sort of actors. So alongside myself and Craig today, we have got friend of the show, collaborator, Di Hill.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I mean, hello.
Yeah, your voice sounds very familiar. I don't know where it's from.
A
Yeah.
horror episode.
Yeah. How have you been? Have you watched any more King Arthur since our last encounter?
I've watched a really mental French version from the 70s.
Right, okay.
If you want to watch mental, hippie, abstract, Holy Grail expeditions, look
Right.
to France.
Okay, right, fair enough.
Just gonna write that one down.
Yeah.
I mean, I do often think of the French when I think of Crusade. So yeah, that kind of works.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
The French, they're mental.
If you are in France, then please write to us. Also,
I mean,
with
if they
us...
get it right to us, then like, yeah, they are probably mental. It's
Yeah.
like, we prefer you write rather than send an email.
Yeah. No, after Brexit, where all communications cut off, so it's only by letter that they can communicate with us. Also with us today is his debut on the show. It is actor and film buff Christopher Maxwell. Hello.
Hello, everyone.
Tell us about what you do, Chris. You do various different projects.
Yes, so I've been acting for a number of years now. I've been moved back to Cardiff back in 2016. It's been my main hub for acting. I work a lot with local theatre and film groups. But just as I suppose my main downtime, it's probably the worst downtime if you're an actor, is to watch films.
Yeah.
It's like, I want to try and get away from this thing that I do that's very draining and demanding. I'll just watch other people do it.
Exactly.
That is such a rewarding feeling to do.
Yeah, that's not going to make me second guess my performances, or maybe.
No, it never does that. It never does that. God damn, these guys are so damn good.
Oh no, I find the opposite. Right, it's just been like, oh, this person's terrible. Why did they get the part?
Don't. Yeah, there are instances where sometimes you're just gritting your teeth, like that's fine, that's fine. Maybe they hired themselves. Only they would.
Yeah, I had that once, and I never want to go through that feeling again.
Yeah. Craig, we've got another co-host, I suppose we could say, who hasn't been on the last few episodes.
Yeah, so last appearing in Film Talk, first appearance on Well Good Movies, we have the show mascot. Finally back from a trip from holiday, we have Swiss Lodge, the dinosaur.
Named by Matro.
Yeah, so in the end game for the last episode of Film Talk, the prize was naming the dinosaur, and Matt chose, without a moment's hesitation, the name Swiss Lodge.
To know the meaning behind that name, see Film Talk episode 10 and all will be revealed.
It's like the intro to Citizen Kane, Swiss Lodge.
Yeah, you'll see later how well Swiss Lodge works in different situations, actually. So that will come up.
Yeah. But no, I do love my beautiful sparkly dinosaur with the colory changing scales.
So fabulous.
Yeah. That is.
I think if dinosaurs had still stayed alive, they would have developed disco scales.
Well, there's this debate about what they would have really looked like, because we haven't got evidence of their skin, or scales. And it's probably, by this evidence, almost certainly pink sequins.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously...
That's what Jurassic Park got wrong.
I mean, obviously the law is that one day Swiss Lodge is going to grow up and become Barney the dinosaur, which is why the purple's waiting. But no, it's good to have you back, bud.
Oh.
So, like I said, we are talking about classic horror films. So, you got your Grudge, The Ring, what else am I thinking? Get Out, all those kind of films that, we've touched on, like, modern horror and stuff before. But we're going to go back today, all the way back the 1930s onwards, in which you get those classic monster movies, and talking about, why are they so influential? Why are there so many? And the fact that they have made a precedent for, people dressing up, and even when you see then the modern takes on it, they always have to have some reference to those original films, music. There's a lot of things that always hark back to those films, and, they were a very big part of, like, early Hollywood. So, we're talking about why, they were such a big staple of that. So what we've done this week is that we are going to be each choosing one of the classic horror films from the sort of like 1930s, so 1960s, and giving sort of like our take on watching it, whether it be for a repeat viewing or for the first time. So first off, we'll go to Di, as he has got the first chronological released film out of our selection today. So Di, tell us about what you watched.
I watched Frankenstein from 1931, which is the one that kind of started all the iconic Boris Karloff Frankenstein. I went into it, kind of couldn't really be bothered. Like I was like, I'm gonna have to sit through like a 2-hour black and white thing. It's gonna be corny. It's actually really short. I thought it was gonna be longer, but I unbelievably loved it. It's an amazing movie, and it holds up. There's a few bits that are hokey, but no, it's incredible. I was so invested by the end. It really comes down to the director, James Whale, and Boris Karloff himself, who played the monster, are unbelievably brilliant. So I was reading about the movie, actually, and apparently originally it was intended to be just like a monster thing. So originally they were going to cast Bela Lugosi as the monster, but Bela Lugosi said, I'm a proper actor, this is rubbish, I'm not just going to like put on makeup and hit people on the head. But he said that the original script, it was literally just, it is a monster that kills people, and that was it. Yeah. But Wales, when he kind of took over as director, he sort of started changing things and started looking more into, and that's where he hired Boris Karloff. And together you can see that they really get into the psyche of the monster, and it is really, the story of the monster is just so engaging, because the thing that they managed to do, which I did not realize was even possible with Frankenstein's monster, is the monster has a character arc. He develops as a character, so usually when somebody's wearing like 6 inches of makeup and got bolts in his head and all this stuff, you'd imagine they're just going to be, it's going to be pretty one note. You're just going to go for like 2 hours, whatever. But Karloff, he starts off, the monster is, this kind of childlike wonder and all this sort of stuff, and he kind of changes. But there's this shot toward the end of the movie where Frankenstein himself is kind of hunting around these mountains looking for the monster, and the monster stands up from behind a rock, and you wouldn't believe how much is said just in how the monster stands and how Karloff uses his body. All he's doing is standing still, but he's subtly shifted from how he stood earlier. And so suddenly you can see that now the monster does understand. He's matured and he's got some sort of goal. And now he's, confronting the person who made it. He's confronting God almost. And it's the most gripping and powerful and brilliant. And I was so unbelievably rooting for the monster.
Yeah, exactly.
And then there's a moment, the moment then is amazing where, so at the beginning of it, he's scared of fire. So the Igorish character has this kind of flaming torch and he goes, "Wah," and he's scared of it. So then Frankenstein thinks, I've got a flaming torch, just to scare him. And the monster, because he's learnt, he just kind of goes and grabs his hand and throws the torch down. And it's the most satisfying, enjoyable moment when he does yes, monster.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But then it's phenomenally tragic at the end because, he gets done in and stuff. But yeah, it's unbelievably, it's really a tragedy. Not really what we'd recognise nowadays as a horror.
No, yeah.
But it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
It was very much like obviously the original novel was basically just that deep philosophical discussion of who is the monster, who is the man, insofar as, God and creation. And pretty much I'm glad that the film does actually have the character arc for Frankenstein, or specifically Frankenstein's monster, pedantics. Because obviously that's what the book is basically. It's just the monster just going across the world, basically just looking for his place in society. Because he doesn't belong anywhere, and just he has to basically come to terms with that. So just turning him into a monster that just randomly kills people would just be hard to swallow. Especially
when it is the type of monster he is, because he is made from various parts of different people. And if it is something like a Jekyll and Hyde character, then you have got he's out of control, or he or King Kong or something. It's something that can climb up a building and that kind of stuff. But again, Frankenstein, he's this slow, clumbering sort of mishmash of different parts and stuff like that. So it is more interesting to go into the psyche of that rather than just seeing some guy just going around, like say, just going and just strangling people, etc.
And really, in the movie, the kind of the villain and the kind of I don't think it quite reaches this. You get the feeling, because you say there was this clearly an earlier script where it was really plain. It was just, and there's a few scenes. There is one scene that's completely out of the blue where the monster just kind of gets into the girlfriend character's room and just kind of approaches her and goes, "Wow," and she goes, "Ah," and then it runs off.
Yeah.
And it's rubbish, and it's got nothing to do with the plot. It's weird.
Yeah.
And in fact, in that scene, the scariest part is that, because she's the fiance of Frankenstein, but she kind of says, I'm scared that the monster's going to be nearby, and then they kind of hear it's making a noise, and so Frankenstein's like, right, I'm going to go get it, and she goes, I want to stay with you, and he goes, no, stay in that room, and he closes the door and he locks her in this room, and that is don't lock women in rooms, mate.
Yeah.
Don't do that. The idea of that he can so casually just imprison his girlfriend is terror, and then he leaves her kind of where the monster is. So that's kind of a lot of where the movie is trying to get to, is that it really the monster is all of man themselves. It's people kind of go and do bad things, and then Frankenstein himself betrays the monster and is
For the people at home, obviously, as well, it's Victor Frankenstein is the person who makes him, well, people will be like, oh, that's Frankenstein. It's well, no, that's Frankenstein's monster. So
that's the classic. But in this movie, they actually change Frankenstein's first name.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So they name Henry Frankenstein.
Right, okay.
Which is, in the book, that's the name of his friend, is Henry,
right.
And they change it around. I think probably quite rightly, because apparently they did it because they wanted to make him sound less automatically a villain, because Victor Frankenstein sounds like a villain.
Yeah.
And they thought Henry would make you think, he might be a nice guy.
Yeah.
And there's that idea in the movie that, he actually initially tries to be quite fatherly, and he tries to be nice to the monster, and then quite casually he's like, well, gotta kill you now. So, it's interesting, and really bears very little relationship to the book. The theme of, why am I here? Oh, you're the monster? Am I the monster? That is the theme, but it's told so much better in the movie.
Yeah.
Because in the book, the monster just hits the nail on the head. It's just goes on. It just literally kind of goes, "Who is the monster? Is it me? No,
Yeah.
I am you." And it's really annoying.
Yeah, he's incredibly well tuned for someone who's meant to be in that existential mess.
Yeah. But also stupidly blunt,
Yeah.
really, and like on the net, so this movie, by taking away all the dialogue from that main character of the monster, it gives it so much more humanity than the book has, and it makes it so much more dramatic and interesting. And also just in terms of the kind of gothic, because it's heavily influenced by sort of German expressionism. So there's all the kind of scenes in the castle and stuff. It's all slightly off kilter and things.
Yeah.
And the big famous scene where he's like, "It's alive!"
Yeah, exactly.
Is this amazing iconic moment, which in the book he's just like in his student digs.
Yeah.
And the book just kind of says, "Oh, I just sort of brought it to life. And I was so horrified that I had to go in another room and have a nap."
Yeah.
And that's all that happens.
It's his student digs. It's like someone in a science class just sort of chilling. Like if it was modern day, they'd just be on their computer just trying to load up Netflix or something, and then all of a sudden this dead mishmash of body parts just wanders in.
He's not wrong. It's basically essentially like a student loft. It is
Yeah.
literally like an attic.
Yeah.
It's literally what it's like.
There probably is somewhere a student who's dropped his Donica bag on the backside of his bed, and it has turned into some sort of creature over time.
It just falls on a rat. The rat runs out. It's like, "It's alive!"
But yeah, I think it's was this your first viewing of it, or did you say it was a revisit? Or
I saw it years and years ago. And I remembered it being iconic, that, those big scenes in it, with the "It's alive," and there's a famous one with the girl by the lake which is really harrowing.
I was going to say that was the standout moment for me.
Yeah, really, really scary moment. But I hadn't really remembered just how gripping it was, sort of thing. Well, I think when I was younger, I watched it from the perspective of that kind of historical perspective. Like, it's very interesting. You can see how all the details have influenced modern cinema.
Yeah.
Because so much of it has influenced modern cinema.
Yeah,
there's so many-
the burning at the mill and everything like that, is it?
Yeah.
And you sort of think you watch it and you think "Oh wow, this is where this is from," and and they do recreate it very well a lot of the times.
Yeah. So there's so many little details like that, and like the way it kind of stalks people, and even things with there's a scene, after the small child he kills this small girl, and his dad kind of takes her through the village and just kind of carries her through the village, and everyone kind of stops and looks, and that's the thing when you go, "Oh, I've seen this in about 5 different movies, this scene."
Yeah.
And there's so many little details like that you can see are very influential.
That's what I loved about it when I saw it. It was a few years ago, but it very much, you do go into these films thinking, what is so iconic about them, and you think, like you said, you're just going to see this sort of monster traipsing around bashing people, and when I first experienced it, like I said, I didn't expect that humanity and those deeper meanings, and when you do look at a lot of film history, it is that kind of stuff. Even things like George Mellet, and you've got things like the Soviet era films, they're all about deep things and about the working man and all this kind of stuff. And it does link in kind of with that they're trying to do these bigger themes. So a lot of the times when people are like, "Oh, you look at those old black and white movies, they're just silly," they're just, it's like, well, no, actually, they could be more thought-provoking than some of our modern films. Because, in some ways, that's all they had. Because, one, it probably was a lot darker time to live. But two, they didn't have special effects and stuff to rely on. So...
Yeah.
But I think a lot of the themes and elements you've brought up will definitely come up in a lot of the other ones. Any other sort of comments on Frankenstein?
Just when you talked about that idea of the sort of the sympathy for the character as well, it's so interesting that that figure, that square head, those bolt necks, it's considered a horror monster icon, and but he is quite far removed from Dracula and, as you said, Jekyll and Hyde and the Wolfman, because the Wolfman and Hyde, they're like alter egos that are precisely the evil side or the monstrous side. Whereas this is a monster that's been built, and it's almost like learning to not be a monster. But it's such a tragic thing that he's built. From Frankenstein's perspective, it's built for him as a challenge.
Yeah.
And people see it and they immediately go, "Well, he looks weird, so he's clearly wrong."
Yeah.
And then it's so unique that he's become this horror icon.
Yeah, and that's an element of other universal horror or sort of classic horror films, is that when you look back at the history of it, you've got, like you said, like Phantom of the Opera was classed as one of those universal horror staples. So when they had the monster films that like united them all, Avengers style, Phantom of the Opera was one of them, and you're like, what? When you look at it now after the musical, but it was a very much different story before the musical and everything was created.
Thank you, Lloyd Webber.
You had the same thing with Hunchback, like it was like the Hunchback and everything, and you know that changed. I think what was the other one I'm thinking of? There's a few like that. King Kong as well, like, you know, he became more of a sympathetic, whereas before he was the tyrant and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's happened with a few, but Frankenstein does seem to still be in that grey area of like, yeah, he's either possibly because of things like Munsters and Addams Family, where he's that sort of vampire werewolf staple character, but yeah, he has got a lot of human qualities to him. That
I think a lot of the later movies, because I've seen a few that there's kind of Hammer ones as well, and in those ones he's just a monster. They really boil it down a bit, and then I don't know, haven't seen. There's a recent one, isn't there? Frankenstein movie.
I was going to mention that. Yeah,
I haven't seen that. But is it
it focuses on James McAvoy playing Victor Frankenstein, and it pretty much is like
it's weird. Basically, it's told from the perspective of Igor by Daniel Radcliffe. Yeah, and like it's meant to follow like Frankenstein, but then it does that very, very typical at the end. Once the monster is created in the last, say, 10, 15 minutes, what have I done? Instantly becomes just a juggernaut thug.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like it's literally like you don't see the Frankenstein monster until the end of the movie. It's the final act of the film is him creating it, and it immediately causes chaos kind of thing. So it literally is.
They
Victor
literally go
Frankenstein.
to like an island off of Scotland to like create him in like
Yeah. So it is literally about Victor Frankenstein because it's so much his film rather than so.
Because that's the other thing about it. He becomes the monster because of its nature and nurture.
Yeah.
He's turned into a villain.
Yeah.
Because everyone treats him terribly. So he basically comes to a conclusion that, fine, I will use my freakish strength and I will scare people.
Well, I didn't mind Victor Frankenstein because I thought there was interesting elements of it. I thought, ego, etc., and looking at the man himself. So a lot of that film is then based around, you can't do this, you can't recreate life. And then they sort of proved right that, he can't. But it's not, like you said then, so much about the actual monster himself.
It's just not what you watch the film for.
Yeah.
But I think that's, there's definitely, the story is there with Victor Frankenstein, the character as well, of that descent into kind of madness, which, again, the book, in the movie, the 31 movie, that opens with him, like, stealing bodies and things, and you immediately have this kind of insane character. But there's a lot of horror and an interesting journey within Victor Frankenstein himself, because he's starting off as being quite a normal student and ending up, sewing on body parts and things. Yeah. And so there's an interesting character there.
Yeah.
But the other final thing, the movie sort of acted, I think this is hangover from the original script, where it's meant to be a lot simpler. But saying about, like, is it nature or nurture? Turns out it's nature, because when the Igor, he's not actually called Igor in the film. He's called Fritz, they call him. And it's only a few movies in they start calling him Igor.
I found that weird, yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit confusing. But he's stealing in to nick the brain.
Yeah.
And they've literally got 2 jars. And there's this lecturer giving a lecture, and he's like, "This is a normal brain of a normal This is a criminal brain.
Yeah.
Look how bad it is. It's a criminal brain. If you're gonna bring a life back to them, the dead, don't use this one. It's a no-go brain. Don't do it.
This is the normal brain. This is Hitler's brain."
No. This is a normal brain. This is a normal brain on crack.
But then they just written normal brain and abnormal brain in like felt tip pen on each jar.
Yeah.
So Igor gets in and he's like, normal brain, abnormal brain.
It would have been brilliant because I'm assuming the brains looked almost identical.
Yeah, you can't.
So it would have been a case of like he accidentally. What did you read? Well, I did you read the words correctly? I didn't. Did you give him the abnormal brain? I got confused.
It's like
Igor.
It's like Emperor's New Groove versus like the label has like fallen down so it looks like poison. It's like just abnormal has been like covered up by something else. Like normal, abnormal. Oh, I didn't see the AB, sorry.
I gave him the wrong brain. I'm so sorry.
I thought it meant awesome, brilliant.
It's like, no. I'm really sorry I gave him the criminal brain. I just thought the bandana they put on it looked really cool.
really want to see like the alternate version where they do give him the normal brain.
Yeah.
And it turns out he's a really lovely monster.
Yeah.
I have a normal brain.
Yeah.
He comes like a stockbroker.
Yeah.
So going from Frankenstein, about a monster, like I said, to then a icon of other horror franchises, especially like things like the poster and the iconography. Chris, tell us about the film you decided to watch.
Well, I decided to watch The Creature from the Black Lagoon, who is an interesting... Because it's one of those ones that everyone sort of knows about. It's the fish monster or the gill man, as he's been described. And I'd never seen it before. So I figured I'd try and look for something that's a bit out there. But he's often associated that image of that fish face. So when I went to watch it, the biggest thing I took away from the film as a whole was there's very much a sort of emphasis on science in this film. So the opening line, there is a biblical verse of God created the world, and then it goes into a more scientific explanation. And one of the other things I noticed about it was because it follows a group of archaeologists and researchers and scientists, and the archaeologist discovers a fossilized claw, and it's like, oh, we found something amazing, so we have to research it. And it's one of the ancestors or relatives of the creature. It's been preserved. So a lot of it is lots of science talk, lots of science conversation. And this is an interesting note from the films of that time as well.
Yeah.
There were very few occasions where if characters were speaking, they were alone on screen. Characters, when they were conversation, they were always grouped together. There was group shots. There were very few examples of just like one person talking, then the reaction and things like that.
Sounds a bit like The Day They Stood Still, that kind of like...
It was almost a very theatre-style sense of acting. So it was quite realistic. And then the very few solo shots they have would be of someone swimming or someone... Or in the case, there's quite an interesting shot of the creature just looming in towards the camera as everyone's back's turned. But yeah, this idea of the science of it all. And the creature in this, again, is quite sympathetic because he's just in his own environment and there's all these people that have come along and they are disturbing him, so he's lashing out. And when they actually get to the Black Lagoon, the famous Black Lagoon, the creature's swimming around, and the film's only just over an hour long, but didn't feel that. It felt very long,
really,
because there is a lot of is it now, is it now, is it now? When is this? Because you see the creature quite early on, in the water, and it's like, is he gonna do it? Is he gonna do it? No. Is he? And then when finally it starts happening, it's like, oh, now it's all kicking off. It's really great. But like, there's a point where there's one of the researchers' partner. She's there, and they've gone under, and they've done some swimming around, and they've found some interesting rocks. And she goes for a swim. Right. By herself, and the creature's just there swimming around, and it's like, oh, he's gonna get her. No, he doesn't get her. So there's a lot of waiting around, a lot of like nothing really happening. But when they finally discover, and they know for certain that this creature is down there, there's the two differing sides. There's the one who's like, we need to capture it at all costs and kill it and do science stuff to it, and there's the other one who's like, hang on, this is a living creature, maybe we don't need to be so brash. So there's the whole idea of there's almost an ethics to it as well. And like I said, the biggest thing I got away from this film was a big statement for science and doing things right by science. Having said that, they do poison the lagoon several times to try and draw it out from the water.
Kill all other fish.
They literally just go around just throwing poison in, and dead fish rise. It's like, it's not working. It does get him high.
Okay.
But yeah, so at one point they're like, we need to get the creature so dazed and confused that we can then hopefully stop it.
So they turn it into a surfer dude, basically.
Yeah, because that's another thing about the film. The majority of the action takes place on the lagoon where they're on the boat, and then the creature eventually traps them in the lagoon so they can't escape. And there's a fairly decent body count, I think of about 7 or 8 people. And I love the way because you never saw the deaths, you just saw the hands and the scream, and then everyone's reaction to it. So it was very the old school techniques you do, but it was also very clever because he's like, what did they do? What did he do to them? In fact, there's a great bit where they return to the site after they've the archaeologist has returned to the researchers, and he walks into the tent, and it's just them staring at what's happened, and they're like, "Oh no!" And you're like, "What happened? What did this creature do?" But yeah, as a film, it's the biggest thing I could take away from it. It's very well made.
Yeah.
Because there's lots of underwater shots, and there's lots of shots of the creature swimming around in the water in that suit. Up close, it's a bit dated, but bloody hell, it was impressive.
Yeah.
It was so impressive, the swimming that he was doing, and the difficulty in that suit, which was thick as all hell. And it's quite amazing to think that the length they went to for a sea creature film, you know, and like I almost feel like, because of the nature of you know, you need to see what the creature looks like. They could have easily just not had shots of it. They could have gone the whole POV view, but that was long before this.
Yeah.
And you can see the influences of this film on later sea creature movies like Jaws and things like that.
And Finding Nemo.
Oh, and Finding Nemo, definitely Finding Nemo.
The joke I was going to make was Shape of Water.
Well, yeah, that's even the monster itself is influencing it.
But like, the creature himself is a very... He's just he's a fish out of water. He's just there, and all these people have come along. He's like, just go away. He just wants them to leave.
Yeah.
Until eventually he steals the woman away, as if to sort of be like, and he actually does it as a trap to lure them in, so he can finally be rid of them. Because after a while, he traps them, because I think his intention is like, right, I need to kill you. Because I think he cottons on to the idea of, you're going to come back with more people like you, and I don't want that. This is my lagoon. You stay away from my lagoon. And yeah, in the end, after, spoiler alert, the creature gets shot several times. And going back to this idea of the sympathy and empathy towards the character, the main hero just sort of goes, no, just let him go. And he just returns to the lagoon. And he's just, it's sort of, is he dead? You see the body sinking, but, you know, you never quite get the answer to it. And it's a very, very strange, rushed final 5 minutes.
Yeah. A lot of those early films tend to have that, don't they? Because they don't even have the emphasis on credits, because they usually have an opening credit. So it's very much like, all right, here's the quick scroll and that's it kind of thing.
There's so much stuff of building and lots of conversations, and there's very few moments of action. And when there is action, it's really good. Like, there's an amazing bit where the creature gets set on fire. And it's a full-on, he's actually on fire, and he has to jump into the water to put himself out, sort of thing.
Yeah.
I think as a film, I wouldn't say it was a great story. It's a very simple monster story of something in the water. I think they get hung up on a few moral tales and whatnot. Like, the morality of Frankenstein is such an interesting story. He's created life, and it's all just gone to hell and everything like this. Whereas Creature in the Black Lagoon, there's this creature. We want to research it. We're getting a little bit too ahead of ourselves now. And then eventually it just turns into, oh, he's kidnapped her. You've got to stop it. And
it's a classic thing with older films, I think, where they seem to be more wary of the final act, not stretching out as much. And it seems to be the reverse these days, that they'll have a very rushed first act and then drag out the final act. It used to be a bit the reverse. They were like, okay, people want to get out to cinema now.
Like, this film could have easily been cut down.
Okay, right.
It could have even been shorter, I think.
Sounds technically as well, like that's why its biggest influence is, like you said, where you've got the stories like Frankenstein, which is then the morals of it. It sounds with that one, like I said, if there's all that stuff about the water and just the imagery of it, like I said, the thing that always drew me to it was just that poster you always see of him holding the woman and stuff.
Yeah.
And we were talking as well before, wasn't it? Because it was in 3D as well.
Which is quite incredible, like, at the time. And I think that was the big... Now that you've mentioned that again, actually, I think that's the big emphasis to take away from it.
Yeah. Did you watch it thinking, I can see how this would be good in 3D? Or
going back, now that I'm thinking about it, it's starting to make a lot more sense, because there's a lot of shots of sea life. Yeah. There's a lot of shots of just people swimming, or there's shots of like the bit where the creature looms towards the camera. I could tell that would have been probably great for an audience at the time. It's like it literally coming right for me, and that would have probably spooked people. So I think that's probably explains why there's not much sustenance to the actual story. Although there is a great moment in it where they're on the water and they're like, What do you think about this? And one of them's like, oh, it's the standard waffle. It could just be anything. It's like, yeah, but think about it. We always talk about the possibility of life in the stars, but what about life like this, advanced life in our very oceans? And it was quite a nice thing for them to sort of, again, like that emphasis on science and the possibilities. Yeah. This was definitely a film of that mystery science theater ilk, that sort of this, look at all the cool stuff that could possibly be, and you get stuff like fishmen and all this magic and crazy science things that could be happening. Overall, like, as a film though, I think it was mostly just done as a visual style. It was definitely like, look at how impressive this film is. Look at the swimming shots and the underwater shots, because again, underwater shots at that time, quite impressive.
I think it's perfectly fair if a film like that does become like a visual experience to begin with, because I think, as David was saying, like the technical constraints, meaning that a lot more films at that time tried to focus on story and elements that could make horrifying without needing like so many prosthetics. Like, kind of refreshing when you do have films that like start exploring more into that area of just getting the sort of technical expertise to get an experience like that. Because I think of the 4 films we're talking about today, I think that's probably the most unique experience.
Yeah,
and the most science fiction-y as well, probably as well.
Yeah.
Well, actually, it might be other elements, but any experiences with this die yourself? Or
I don't know anything about this creature of the Black Lagoon. Have there been many? Is that one there haven't been many remakes?
No, there was sequels though.
There were 2 sequels, but in terms of remakes, they have tried to remake this film. I was looking at research. There's been so many attempts to try and remake this, and it's just never gotten off the ground.
Oh, really? Wow.
Some people have wanted to. I think there was John Carpenter wanted to do it.
Right.
Of course he did.
Of course he did. Of course he did. But can you imagine what his version of the creature of the Black Lagoon might be? Kurt Russell will be there on a boat. But yeah, like, it's just one of those films that just never got remade.
Makes sense.
But it's lived on.
Yeah.
Quite not infamous, quite famously, which is quite amazing.
Would you say it's got any scary elements to it?
I suppose I don't really know. There wasn't many moments of it where I was genuinely frightened. And I think the idea of a man-like creature being in the ocean, that, you know, the sea and the water and what lies beneath is always an interesting thing. And I think there is always an unease about the water and something in the water.
Because fish are weird.
Yeah. But in a post Jaws world, probably very different. Whereas maybe people before Jaws would have been like, "Oh my god, that's scary! Look, they're swimming in the sea," and that kind of stuff. But it's interesting to have that different take. For myself, so I chose Dracula, which is the Hammer horror version, which was released in 1958. So there's the Dracula that came out near to Frankenstein in the 1930s, but this is the version that has Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee, which is why I wanted to see this film for so long, because, like I said, I can't exactly call myself a Peter Cushing fan because there's all these horror films he's been in which I've never seen. But when you watch things like Star Wars and Lord of the Rings and you see Christopher Lee talking about his relationship with Peter Cushing, and you see the behind the scenes of Star Wars and why he was cast as such a big actor at that time to be in Star Wars as Grand Moff Tarkin, you kind of want to know where that legacy came from. And I just love Christopher Lee and everything he's in. So with him, I've seen a lot more because he was quite linked to Burton, in the Tim Burton films. He's does a fantastic job in the Lord of the Rings films, and he's just an amazing, fascinating person. So with him playing Dracula and Peter Cushing playing Van Helsing, what better combination could you get? And that's at the time of the film's release. That's what they used very much to their advantage. Is those were the headline stars. So I wanted to have this sort of look into Hammer horror, which you see quite a lot as a very famous subgenre of horror films, and just see where those actors got their roots. And very similar to yourself, Di. I've really enjoyed it, really loved it. There was some really interesting stuff that was brought out throughout it, and I do enjoy those you can get those old school movies which can be a bit of a bore or a bit of a stretch, but with this one, it's one of those that you just enjoy the theatricality of it, and you enjoy it's not one of I think they obviously get into sillier territory as they go on with different characters and stuff like that, but here you can still very much tell that they're trying for that very serious horror route, but there are elements of silliness in it, but that adds to the theatrics of it, and like you said, Chris, it's very similar in that everyone seems to be playing as if they're on a stage, and I was watching it and thinking, how good would this be as Dracula as a stage show? I don't know if it's ever been done, but
it was. There was a very old one in around 1900 that was.
So I would love to see a modern sort of Dracula on stage, because I think it would really lend itself to it, because you've got a lot of the great scenes in this is where you've got Van Helsing is visiting the family who's been affected by Dracula's sort of like deaths, etc. And, you know, they're in this, you can almost imagine the half rooms stage, and, you know, they're there with all the fancy curtains and the big dresses and everything. And they're like, oh, well, dear, you know, da-da-da, and all this. And you kind of...
Such profound writing there, dude.
Yeah, exactly. But you can imagine it on stage. You can imagine these people giving out this very, like, you know, big performance of, like, you know, as if they're talking to an audience and that kind of thing. And Peter Cushing as well, like, it just emphasised why I love him so much as Tarkin, because he just brings such a gravitas and elegance to everything he does. And he's just so good at what he does. I was watching the behind the scenes, and another one of my favourite people, because he does various things, is Mark Gatiss. So writer, director, actor. He was in the behind the scenes as a fan of the film, and he is talking about Peter Cushing, the intelligence that he brings to every role. So he's talking about how you can see that he's, even in his stupidest and most rubbish films, he still takes it seriously. And that's what I always found amazing with Star Wars, is that, you know, you had this very, like, veteran actor who comes along and does this silly space film, and, you know, he very much takes it on with a lot of, like, respect, and, you know, does it very professionally.
It's really interesting you mentioned that, and the relationship he had with Christopher Lee, because I once heard a Christopher Lee quote, which was, yeah, you'll do bad films, but you should be good.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons why those two have gone on to become such household respectable names. Whatever roles they were doing, they were committed and they were true. And you have to respect that. These two men who could have, like, had careers of kitchen sink dramas and whatnot. It's like, no, you're doing a fantastical world where monsters will suck blood out of your neck.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's the key thing, if, like, with horror and, like, kind of science fiction acting, is the ability to, like, look at sort of like some, like, wavy rubber prop and take it unbelievably seriously.
Yeah.
And so that's why you get some people who are like someone like William Shatner, who no one has ever called a good actor, but he's an amazing Star Trek actor, because he can look at somebody with, you know, a lot of plastic on their face and communicate, you know, that sort of take it seriously.
Yeah, I got that sense as well, because one thing I've been doing recently is going back and watching a load of old Twilight Zone episodes, and I came across the one where William Shatner is the star. It's is it Nightmare
on the plane?
Yeah, like Nightmare 20,000 feet, where literally he's having to look at this guy in really bad, like, sort of gremlin makeup, just being like, and he's just there, like, just taking. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like, you guys are completely understands. Like, no matter what you're in, you've got to give it your all if you can. There's no point in saying, like, well, there's no point.
And that's the great thing about this, is that you get, like I said, Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee, like, go at it so, you know, so professionally, and it's also just nailing the aspects of, like, what makes Dracula interesting. As so here it is more, he is the villain, he's running around killing these people, etc., and Van Helsing is chasing after him, etc. So, you know, it doesn't focus too much on the character of Dracula at all. I think he only has, like, 16 lines of dialogue or something like that. I think he's maybe like 6 minutes of footage he's actually in. But like you said, you've probably had these in your films, you know, the fact that it will just be like, you know, do you hear that? Or where is he? Cut to the, like, doorway. And as the music goes so big on.
Similarly in Creature, every time the creature appeared, it was this ta-da!
Yeah.
Ta-da!
Yeah,
The
and
exact same
apparently
thing.
with this one, and this was then copied by other films. The composer did it so that the theme matched the name Dracula, so it was like Dracula. So it's like dun, dun, dun. But he's always there, and as Christopher Lee is able to do, because he's a very tall gentleman, and he's just there, stood in his cape, and. Interestingly, again, I was looking at trivia for this film. The cape worn by Lee was rediscovered in 2007 after it was missing for 30 years, and it was found in a London costume shop during their inventory check. What? I work in retail. Like, we do an audit every year, so does that mean like they just overlooked this famous like Hollywood treasure
No,
for like
somebody
30
just
years?
left it on the coat rack, and it was just like, I'm pretty sure Debbie just forgot to take
Yeah.
a cloak again.
Imagine that, like you just do an inventory, and the next thing you know, it's just like, oh well, we were doing the inventory. We found amongst all the chocolate bars, someone's actually left behind an antique steak from the old Dracula movie.
Can you imagine that? Okay, so we've got 5 boxes of fake paint. We've got 2 boxes of slutty police outfits. We have 1 Dracula cape. This is, oh dear God.
Or the year before that, someone just sewed like C. Lee into the back of that cape, and someone else was like, "It must be the one."
Yeah.
Gotta be it.
But like I said, what I find so interesting is that the first 20 minutes of the film is like this character who decides to take it upon himself to sort of kill Dracula. Doesn't go well for him. It's one of those typical silly decisions in a horror film where you're just watching it going, what are you doing? Like he literally like he takes his stake and hammer. He's got the 2 open coffins of the bride and Dracula, and he looks at the 2 and goes, I'm going to go for the bride first. And I'm like, what? So he's there, and as soon as he puts the stake in, what happens? You just literally, the next shot is just Christopher Lee's eyes opening, and you're like, of course that was gonna happen. He's gonna wake up when he hears his bride like screaming to death in agony. Like, what did you expect him to do? Sleep through it? So that was crazy to me.
I thought they were heavy sleepers.
Exactly, yeah. I thought it was daytime, so it was fine. It's like, no. But yeah, you know, so the performances are fantastic throughout. Like I said, Peter Cushing has some fantastic scenes. He has this like great scene where he's talking into like a dictaphone sort of thing, and he brings up, you know, like the fact that the person who is then possessed by this curse seems very much like a drug in which, you know, they hold on to life, and, you know, they're lured by the, you know, the blood sucking and stuff like that, which I think is interesting because that's always an element I liked of modern vampire stories, like being human, where, you know, they make the blood like a drug addiction. So I thought it was quite interesting that they were bringing that up back then.
Well, I mean, if that's how you feel, you should read the actual novel. Like that will blow your mind in terms of what being a vampire is actually allegory for.
Yeah. Well, that's, I mean, that's where that was sort of like touching on those themes.
No, it's
but
not.
What?
It's a completely different theme in the book.
Oh no. I was going to say with other themes that are brought out in the film as well. But what's the theme you're going to say?
The stealing of virginity.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's about sex.
That's what I was going to say was the other themes, that there was a big thing with this film about like the rating of it, especially because there was so many scenes in which, you know, he's there luring over the women and they're like opening their necks up for him, etc. One note I have to bring up as well is the fact that I just wrote in my notes, Peter Cushing slaps Gerda. So the handmaiden of the house or whatever in the family is being attacked is called Gerda, and she sees Dracula and is just in a fit of panic, like, oh, he looked like the death, da, 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 da. Peter Cushing, who's been throughout this film like a very well respectable man, he's just there with his gloves on, he's telling people, unfortunately your friend has died, and he's just there telling everybody, and she's just there in a fit, he just slaps her straight across the face. He was like, get a grip, we need to find out the other thing. I was like, oh my god, he's just slapped her across the face, what the hell?
If you think that's bad, he destroyed someone else's entire planet.
Yeah, he was building up
That's
to
a hell
that.
of a slap across the face.
So yeah,
It was a metaphorical slap in the face.
so there's loads of, like I said, it was really fun. I loved the theatrics of it. Really staple of horror. Christopher Lee makes, you know, like him with like that sort of bloodshot eyes, just, you know, really sticks in your mind. Peter Cushing is fantastic, and then he, you know, the two of them continue to appear in a lot of the sequels. I know one of the ones you mentioned, Di, was Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires.
Oh, yeah.
Which I didn't manage to watch, but I did watch the trailer for it, and it did make me laugh because when you told me about it, I was like, why would they make this film? So they made several Dracula sequels like Son of Dracula and Dracula AD, and where like Dracula's in London attacking people and all these different things. But yeah, they have this like combination of martial arts and vampires, where Van Helsing goes to China to help them with a vampire problem they've been having, which then essentially breaks into some martial arts vampire fighting. So yeah, I watched the trailer, and apparently like you can see, like similar with Creature of the Black Lagoon, there's a 3D thing. With this, the advertising was, for the first time ever, horror meets martial arts. So it was very much like Bruce Lee meets, like Frankenstein. So like bring those two genres together. And yeah, I don't think that went too well because I've never seen a film like it since. But yeah, it looked mental. So where you can find it, I'm not sure. Probably somewhere on the internet.
In your dreams.
Yeah. You said you watched it and you just remembered
I
it.
saw it, yeah. I remember there being very little actual kung fu in it.
Yeah.
And the kung fu there was mostly just sort of blokes in really heavy, like, because the costumes were massive for the vampires.
These big, like, skeleton outfits.
Yeah, I remember them being huge, so they can't really move. And so the kung fu amounts to them just sort of, like, waggling their hands about and, like, waving a sword and then falling over. And you're like, oh, well done, movie.
Yeah, exactly.
By the way, David, did you just call them Skellington costumes?
Probably, yeah.
Jack Skellington was in this film.
Yeah. Something else interesting I found was when I was looking at the cast of it, is the person who plays, so there's like the husband and wife, and then like they have his sister who then gets attacked by Dracula. So the husband is played by Michael Gough. And he was talking throughout it, and I was just like, where do I know this guy from? And he's the guy who plays Alfred in the old Batman films. So I was just like, oh, right, this makes sense now. But yeah, he also has one of my favourite lines in the film, which is when they go to then, unfortunately, put a stake through another vampire bride. Van Helsing sort of says, it's like, this is the only way. He sort of grabs him and he went, is there no other way? At which point, Peter Cushing just shakes his head and he goes, but it's horrible. And I was just like, this is the most blunt line. That's all it was. And then you immediately after, you then get Van Helsing going into this big thing of like, the person you know now is just a shell. They are gone, etc. But I just loved the bluntness of like, but it's horrible. Yeah, that's most films. Like, do we have to behead Thanos? Yes. But it's horrible. It's like, I just want that moment to be in other films. But yeah, you could definitely see why it's a staple of Hollywood with Dracula. So that was my choice. Craig, your pick, quite different.
Yeah, so we've talked obviously about a variety of different monsters, but I think the greatest monsters we need to talk about are children. So my film was Village of the Damned. So you may know this as the children with the glowing eyes and the mind control powers. I obviously knew about the cursory sort of these children are disturbing going into the film, but I was really interested about like how they basically their origin, because the origin's in the film and it's just weird. Basically, one day in this village in England, not far from London, basically everyone within like a radius of this village just instantly just knocked out, just asleep. You walk within this radius, you just fall unconscious, and everyone's like that for about a day, and people are like, "What's going on?" Then they just get up, and it turns out in that time, all of the relevant women, as in any woman who could, get pregnant. So this is like mass conception from space or something. So they're all pregnant, which leads to a couple of issues, such as husbands thinking their wives have cheated on them because they were off in the war. Virgin 17-year-olds going to the vicar being like, I promise you we've done nothing. What's going on? And just genuinely just upsetting a great number of people. And I also find out later in the film that this happened across the world in different areas, and we get to hear about what happened in those areas. But basically, the children develop quite quickly, and they develop this sort of hive mind. So you teach one of them something, everyone learns the trick. And a lot of the film is basically just exploring essentially the world and reactions of people created because of this. I wanted to see more of it because I wanted to see more of the extreme reactions. But you see husbands hating their wives. You see women being really concerned about the idea of, I don't know where this child has come from. I don't know what this child is going to be like. I don't like this. And then basically the children start doing sinister things. Like somebody upsets them, they just use their mind control powers and just do bad things to them. And eventually they just start killing. And it's really interesting. What I really want to talk about, though, is what happened to those other groups, because it gets to the point where the group in England are the only ones left. So here are some of the things that happened. In one of the colonies in, say, I think Australia, the children just die out. They don't survive through childbirth, right? Fair enough, those happen. In sort of the Alaska region, so where you would get like the Inuit communities, they didn't like the idea of blonde-haired children being born from black-haired mothers, so killed them all. Wow. Yep. In another community, I can't remember the name. The fathers outright kill all the children and the mothers.
So all the women are gone.
Well, all the women who could give birth.
Yeah.
And my personal favourite one, because it is arguably topical, is that the community in Russia, they survived for a couple of years, but then the Russian government were a bit suspicious and, a bit untrusting. And they knew that they had to deal with them from a distance, so they couldn't use their mind control powers to understand what's going on. So they nuked them.
Classic Russians.
Yeah, they literally sent a missile to the small town that they're living in and just nuked the town. So they killed the entire town to deal with these kids. Just a small group of children, and then the ones remaining are just like, we need to survive. We will do whatever it is to survive. And they do things like someone accidentally almost hits them with a car, so they make him get back in the car, drive into a wall, and blow up. They get a guy to literally shoot himself through the head. And they also get somebody in a violent mob to set themselves on fire. And basically, there's not really much story past that, apart from one scientist who's technically his son, I guess, is one of the children, even though he outright says, can't prove it's my child. I can imagine that's the case, given that there are 5, 6 children walking around looking exactly the same. He's basically trying to say they should be here for human progress, and everyone's just like, no, they need to be contained. And in the end, he blows them up. But here's the thing, right? He basically keeps thinking about a brick wall to mask what he's doing. Which I'm just like, how does that work, given the fact that you'd be thinking, have to think of a brick wall so I don't think about the bomb I've got in my bag. Oh, wait, they now know about the bomb. Damn. No, they just get easily blown up. But so I find the world fascinating, but there's not really much character to apart from that. And I think the one thing that stands out here, which is really ironic, given... Because obviously we've had the range of monsters from you guys, and I'm here talking about potentially alien children. There's no sympathy for them. Even the moment you see them and hear about them, you hear about the demonic eyes, and the eye effects they give them for the time look really good. This was out in 1960, but even then, just without using the sort of glowy sort of sort of effects. Yeah, great depth, I know. Even without those qualities, they do really do a good job at making these children just appear sinister. And even when they talk, they have the very stereotypical British accents, it's okay, mother. And there's this weird scene of they all go into a corner shop at the same time, and they're like, you would rather we didn't come in here anymore? That's fine, we'll send someone else to pick up our order in future. And just all walk out, and I'm just like, what the hell is going on here?
Yeah, I'm really surprised by how this film is about the effects of them being born once, etc. Because I always just saw it as it was just this one weird village and this one isolated incident. So it's strange that, and then it takes this, like you said, almost Creature of the Black Lagoon of oh, let's look at the science and what would have happened, in other countries and the moral dilemmas of it. I thought it was more about these children are creepy and, what's the deal with them? And like you said, more into the...
Yeah, they really don't turn up until a good halfway through the film. In fact, they spend almost the equal amount of time looking at the actual incident itself. So there's a lot of time spent with the police and the military trying to work out what's going on with the actual like area, including the dumbest decision I think I've ever seen in cinema, which is that, okay, we have this radius that we know that if we go within, we'll have somebody pass out. Let's fly a plane over that radius to see what's going on. And they say to the pilot, the moment you start to feel like you're passing out, turn around.
Yeah.
I'm like, are you joking? So what do we think happens, guys?
He's fine.
He goes back, lands his plane, and goes, "Oh, I need a coffee."
Or do we think it's secret option C? He passes out, crashes the plane, and then 2 seconds after that happens, the phenomenon ends and everyone just wakes up. So he sacrifices life for nothing. They don't even go after him to make sure he's okay or anything in case of like, oh, he might just be injured. No, the moment the plane crashes, they're all like, well, he's gone.
There's Gary.
But
It's okay, they're awake now.
It's
fine.
It's such a like part of certain pop culture, isn't it? Because the thing I always knew it from, and like many things in my life, is The Simpsons. When when they had that sort of like they knew about the parents, like Mr. Flanders has been doing this, and like
so I think like it did create this weird trope of like creepy British children, as well as like every now and then like the glowing eyes. But yeah, it was. I know. I gotta say, I liked it. It was not what I was expecting. I was expecting it to be like these kids just come out of nowhere, but they do a really good job at setting it up. So, like the beginning of the film is a very, very natural sort of environment, and then all of a sudden you just see one guy collapse, and then like you just go around this village. There's somebody on a tractor who runs over a tree because they're passed out. It's a really eerie atmosphere, and also the end has like one of the most terrifying effects I've ever seen in film. It's just like, it's weird, basically. So the house that all of these kids are in is blown up, and like people go to the house and they see it. And all of a sudden, these sets of eyes just appear on top of each other, like on the screen. They're just stacked there, and then just fly at you one by one in just different directions. And they look like if somebody was a half human, half bird. Like the eyes were closer together and like a bit beaky, and I was like. I was literally backing away because I was like, this is uncomfortable. But
it's very much sounds of that, like with those films which are more 50s, 60s, speaking to that era of Cold War, in which they're like, these films are going to be about like, psychic abilities and, like what are they thinking and, like all that kind of stuff.
It's a very Body Snatchers-esque thing to it, but I think the very creepy insidiousness of like they've all been impregnated whilst they've passed out. And it's really interesting because I've seen the remake with Christopher Reeve, but I had no idea the original had different parts of the world dealing with it.
Yeah, so I think what's interesting as well, because the remake is set in America, right?
Yeah.
So you could literally argue that's basically just not even necessarily a remake, but it's just what happened in their part of the world. And then,
actually, that's a fair point. So the idea of it happening in all these different parts of the world, weirdly, it gave me a World War Z vibe.
Yeah. Of
this weird thing that has affected loads of different places in the world, but also the fact that like they tell you what's happened in these parts, they tell you all these things. It's become it almost feels quite like analytical. And like there's a lot of, and like you said, a lot of talking about the pregnancy and the passing out. There's a lot of build up to that. Whereas one of the sort of things with horror is they like not to explain a lot.
Yeah.
But obviously the phenomenon is so outrageous. What happened? Well, everyone fell asleep and now all the women are pregnant.
I think that's what I actually find really refreshing about like more classic horror films is they really care about the concepts. So they'll spend a lot of time developing these concepts rather than trying to rely on like rather than relying on a mystery and then once it's revealed having that be a bit of a letdown. Because when they just basically take step by step, it's like, okay, so we have these rays from space, sort of like radar rays that we're sort of shooting out, basically coming back in. They seem to have caused these phenomenon, which has caused the pregnancy, and it's of alien origin. It's just like, it just shifts the focus of what the film's going to be about. And like we were talking about this earlier, because what's the original novel it's based off of?
Based on the book The Midwich Cuckoos by John Wyndham. which is remarkably similar. I haven't seen the film, so we were kind of comparing notes on what is between
Yeah,
them.
because the thing that seemed to be missing there was that it was basically the community reactions were very much the same.
Yeah,
And,
but
like,
they go into it more in the book. So there's a lot more about the sort of the families and how they react and how they try to raise these kids kind of as their own. So some families reject the kids and other families kind of love them and all that sort of thing. So it's really interesting from
that's what I really
community perspective.
Yeah, that's what I thought was the most interesting. And then you said that the book didn't give any details about like what happened in like the other colonies.
Not really, unless it mentioned it briefly, but it's not part of it. But
which again, like those were my most interesting aspects of the film. When the kids are just there, like, you know, being British children, I wasn't as engrossed because I was just like, right, well, we've already heard about like how many of your counterparts have been killed. Obviously, it can be done.
I love the idea as well that in the people that don't react as aggressively or dangerously are the people from Britain, and I'd like to think that's because all the children, all parts of the world, had that same language. So basically, everyone who is in that Inuit culture is like, why are they all talking like?
Oh, especially
they
if
sound too English.
Especially if that time in like the Russian colony as well. Like they wake up speaking English. They're just like,
So, comrade, we have problem with children. What problem? They're little Englands. Say that again. Look. Oh, hello there, comrade. How you all doing there? Kill him. Kill them all.
Even if they talked in the dialect of that country, but just with that posh accent, that they would still be like, what?
Whiskey.
I'll have a whiskey, please, comrade.
It's
Niet.
Well, when you're talking about that modern pop culture aspect of like, you know, they don't look at the concept anymore, and it's typical in it reminded me when you mentioned it to me of the Umbrella Academy, the Netflix series, because that comic or series goes along the same concept of like at one moment in the world, the same minute, same time of day, etc., all these random women gave birth to a child who weren't pregnant before, and then it just leaps into then 6 of those children who's adopted by this man, and they become a superhero team. But I was kind of like, I want to know more about like why that happened and what happened to all the other children and the other women who give birth to them and stuff, but they don't. But
it's a bit like a film we saw this year where at one point in the world everyone was struck by this curse apart from 3 people, which made them forget the Beatles.
Yeah.
I want to know why that happened and why that film happened.
We'll never know. So, guys, like I said, those are all our picks for our classic horror films. Obviously, there's many more out there. Those are just ones we sort of randomly chose this year. So we got Frankenstein, Creature from the Black Lagoon, Dracula, and Village of the Damned. The big question is now, obviously, part of our job here on this podcast is to recommend items to the movie vault, which is the vault by the film god, where we like to place all of our recommended movies, which symbolize what we are talking about. So can we choose a film from these which you think should go into the movie vault, especially considering that, you know, only each one of us is, you know, we've all had different interactions with it. Some of us, only one of us has seen, etc. From what we've discussed, what are your guys' thoughts on that? If this was to go in a sort of vault of, you know, to teach you about film, etc., or like to...
So only one of these films can go...
No. Just like if it can be all of them, it could be none of them, it could be one of them. But, you know, it's like you said, what are your guys' take on it? Like, to me, I'm thinking we're talking about classic horror films. So, like I said, do you go down the scientific route, which 2 films go, or do you go down the monster route, which 2 of the films go? You know, what is that genre to you, and what maybe would be the best depiction of that? Is there 2 of those films that do that for you? What do you think?
It's really interesting because I think one of the things I've just noticed now is that we have both gone sort of 2 sets of the spooky monster and the science, and I think that one of them that sort of blends both together is Frankenstein's monster.
Yeah, and I would agree in that it has such that morality to it as well. It's great.
The thing about Frankenstein's monster as well, which I get from the impression of what a lot of you guys are talking about, because you say about with the Creature from the Black Lagoon, you know, the fact that they talk about science a lot. They go, hello, is this science? No, this is science. No, that's science. So,
like, there's a quote from it, actually, which is brilliant with the archaeologist. And so the captain of the ship asks him, what does he say now? Yeah. You eat rock. Who eats rocks? I eat rocks. I take the rocks, I break them open, and I learn things. And it's just sort of like, wow.
Thanks for telling us that. But Frankenstein has no mumbo jumbo.
No.
It's got none of that talk. It's not got your Star Trek, the fiddly bops and the whizzy bong bings.
Yeah.
It is a pure cinema experience. And that's where, it's saying the difference between, the book where everything is vocalized, it's talked about. And in the movie, it is purely down to the acting and the production. And, it's something which you said with the Dracula where, that's a film that you could imagine being on stage.
Yeah.
That feels like a play that's been filmed. Frankenstein would not work, although apparently it was originally based on a play, but everyone said the play was terrible.
You can't put a windmill on fire on stage.
Exactly.
Okay?
You can't throw a man off a windmill. But this is a purely cinematic experience, which is so told through the visuals, through the acting, and then and there's moments of brilliant editing in it as well. So I think it's a really great, interesting example if you want to put something in a movie vault. This is, I think, one of the purest movies. And also 3 out of the 4 of these are based on books, and which I just thought was interesting.
Yeah.
Are they better than the books is the question, I guess. I think with Frankenstein it goes way beyond what the book does, basically.
Yeah.
It's way better. So yeah, I think it's good.
Yeah, I would be of, well, like I said, I think there's the idea that the books give you different elements and stuff like that. And to me, that's the problem with Dracula is that I sort of watch it and think like, it's not so much like I want to see all the sequels now, but like I said, that there's the original Dracula, which was with the same performer for Frankenstein,
Bela Lugosi. So he was going to be in Frankenstein, but then wasn't.
So then you think, oh well, I should watch that film as well to see that legacy of Dracula. So there's such a legacy around Dracula with different versions, which then you had years later with what's his name? Gary Oldman. So, there's so many different versions, etc. Whereas, like, to me, any versions I've seen of Frankenstein have never matched up with that version, which is in the original. So to me, like I said, I would definitely put Peter Cushing in the movie vault. I'd put Christopher Lee. But like I said, Dracula, I think, is just such a big thing. I would agree that I think Frankenstein represents these really well.
And 4 iconic Dracula performers. Don't forget Jared Butler. Who played him in, I think it's called like Dracula 2000.
That's the one, yeah.
Something like that, where he's in like a shopping centre in America, going like boom out of the sort of CD aisle.
I'd love to see somebody take as well Van Helsing, there's Hugh Jackman Van Helsing and there's Peter Cushing Van Helsing. Which Van Helsing are you, sort of thing? And then I think Dracula's in that film as well. But what's your thoughts, Craig?
I mean, I think it's got to be at least Frankenstein. I do also think that to encapsulate the type of horror that we've been talking about, because obviously you have like classic monster versus like scientific reaction around phenomenon. I feel like we have to put in one of our films. In terms of which film we put in, no major preference.
Yeah, so which one is
I would say out of the 2 probably Creature of the Black Lagoon, just because it's more iconic in terms of the visuals.
Yeah.
And like I said, Village of the Damned, like I said, seems to be about a lot of other genres and then not so much like a Halloween horror film.
It's interesting about those 2 films as well because the antagonistic figures are so iconic. The little British children with blonde hair and the fish man.
Yeah.
But then it's the stories around them that sort of takes away from it. They've gone on to live in infamy and they've gone on to become these icons. Whereas with Frankenstein's monster, the people who they call him, he's a Frankenstein, and they don't really know. The difference with that one is that when you actually watch that story, it's so compelling, and you almost gain a new respect for it on the grounds that this isn't just a monster movie. It's a tragedy. It's heartbreaking. It's interesting as all hell. It's so, and the moral, the moral compass is constantly flicking around in that entire film.
Yeah.
And that's such a great thing for particularly what is essentially a monster movie, because you're not just watching blah and horror.
Yeah.
You're seeing a proper like old school Shakespearean-esque tale.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference between those are 2 films and that one. The monster and the story are both as much important to each other.
Having seen Creature of the Black Lagoon, do you think it would be, like I said, should it just be Frankenstein? Or do you think, like Craig, are you agreeing with Craig that there should be that film to represent that more scientific angle?
I think so. And I suppose, based just on the idea of it, of a monster, like the creature from the Black Lagoon, it's that mysterious creature from the depths.
Yeah.
And that has...
Which, in terms of pop culture, does shape a lot more. So, yeah, I think that should be
absolutely
what represents.
Yeah.
Cool. Right, so going into the movie vault this week then, guys, is 1931's Frankenstein and 1954?
1954?
Yeah, 1954's Creature of the Black Lagoon. Into the film vault you go, Frankenstein and Creature of the Black Lagoon. Thank you, guys. So, like I said, we've gone through our classic horror today. So now we will wrap up with our always fun and not horrific Endgame. So I'll pass you on to Craig now, which will introduce the name and concept of today's Endgame.
Thank you very much. And for listeners at home, I have an end game for you. I want you to go through that episode and count for me how many times David said the name Peter Cushing, and contact us via our social media to let us know, because he said the name a lot.
I said it was the reason I wanted to watch this film. So.
Yeah, but you could have said Peter or just Cushing. You kept saying it over and over.
Oh, no,
you can't just say Peter.
No. Peter.
Peter was lovely. Peter, won't you act in my film, Peter?
Peter just thinks of Hook, where it's like, Peter. And Cushing just sounds like I'm talking about a cushion. The cushion was excellent in that scene.
Anyway, I would like to welcome you to today's Endgame, which we call the Ultimate Horror Lineup. So the idea of this is that we've taken various moments from various films/TV which has some form of horror focus, and we have one of two scenarios we'd like you to do. So one of the scenarios is we'll show you a video clip and we'll pause it at a certain moment in which we would like you to then complete the line. So what we'll do is we'll give you a point if you can say the line or close enough to that line. We'll give you another point if you can say what media it's from. And in certain cases, we will give you a bonus point if you can perfectly replicate the voice of the character giving that line. Okay, so that's for the video clips. So I think we'll do the first video clip round and then explain the rules of the second type of question.
Okay, right, yeah.
So first things first, we need to decide who's going first. So how should we do this, David?
I've got a
Fight
coin.
to the death? Oh, okay.
So then you choose first or second based on, heads or tails?
Tails.
Tails.
What?
I mean heads.
Yeah.
It is tails. So what do you prefer, first or second?
I'll go first.
Go first,
Yeah,
yes?
why not?
Okay.
So
for this one, so this is from a TV show. So like I said, you'll get a point for the line, you get a point for the show, and you get a point if you can do the voice.
So you like donuts, eh? Well, have all the donuts in the world!
More.
So, your answers, please.
I know the show.
Yep.
It's The Simpsons.
Okay. Anything more specific than The Simpsons?
The Simpsons Treehouse of Horror. I want to say Treehouse of Horror 4?
Okay, it's either 4 or 5. That's all I can tell you.
Oh, okay.
But it is Simpsons Treehouse of Horror.
Right.
Perfect.
I feel I can do the voice. I'm not too sure I can get the exact quote.
Okay, that's fine. Just go for what you can.
I don't understand. I can't remember the quote. I can do the voice, but I can't get the exact quote. The voice is, so you like donuts, do you? Well, have all the donuts in the world. But I can't get the rest of the quote.
Okay, so you've got I don't understand.
Yeah.
Can you give us any idea what the line might be?
It's someone gave up after so many.
Okay.
And it's a person.
Okay.
I just-
So in terms of obviously the show,
Yeah.
the episode, etc., and part of the voice, etc., you are correct.
So for that, you will gain 2 points. The exact line, if you please, David.
I don't understand it. James Coco went mad in 15 minutes.
James Coco.
Damn you, Coco.
Coco.
I don't know.
Yeah, I know. I always think that as well. I always think-
I just know him as a guy who gave up after 15
I always think he's going to say something like James Woods or something, you know, some more like Hollywood icon. But yeah, one of the things of The Simpsons where you then realize years later, oh, that's what that was talking about. So we'll now go on to Di's video.
Okay.
Mine. Oh.
So a reminder. So this is a TV show again. So show, line, voice.
Right. It's in black and white.
Yeah.
Mr. Chambers! Mr. Chambers! Don't get on that ship! The rest of the book, to serve men...
Is it? What, is it going to be like the Twilight Zone? Other than that, I don't...
David?
Yes!
You got that right.
Yep.
So it's the rest
So the
of the
line.
book is the,
All right.
the
Yeah.
rest of the book.
So I will happily tell you this is from the TV show. So this is from the episode of the Twilight Zone called "To Serve Man."
Right. Don't get on that ship. The rest of the book, to serve man. I have no idea.
So-
something about the rest of the book.
Yeah,
The
so-
rest of the book, it's about sinking. It's full of plot holes.
Should we
And
play
it's
the
about
clip?
this boat.
Okay. So unfortunately, that was not the line. It's an iconic line from the Twilight Zone. So the actual line is.
It's a cookbook!
Oh. So a giant-headed man pushed him into a
He
spaceship.
didn't put much of a fight up, did he?
Well, when a giant-headed man pushes you over, what are you going to do?
Yeah. So the iconic line. So the idea of this short was that these aliens, the Camamites, note that their names are very similar to cannibals. Basically turn up to Earth and say, we're going to shield you from all harm and we're going to make it so that all of your desert land can grow crops. Obviously turning Earth into a farm. So and they have this book which they encode and they discover the name of the book is called To Serve Man, but obviously it's a cookbook. So after that, obviously you got the Twilight Zone, so we gave you a point. I enjoyed the voice, so we gave you a point.
Yes.
You were so close with the line. You started to say To Serve Man, and then you just needed to say it's a cookbook.
And I made a joke about being a ship full of plot holes.
Yeah.
I thought it meant like a ship as in a boat.
That's
No.
what I thought.
Yeah.
No, it was indeed a spaceship with a giant-headed man just forcing him on.
So
Anyway.
our next element.
So, the second part of this quiz is that we have the scripts of 4 different horror films that David and I will act out a part of.
Yes.
We have changed certain names to represent our own. We have changed certain defining features into a different word to mask the identity of this film.
I'll tell you it is. Can I just tell them what?
That's fine.
Yeah, it's our mascot. So
Swiss Lodge. So if you hear Swiss Lodge, it is basically what was meant to be in that film instead. So for this, you only get 1 point, and that is what film are David and I acting out? So, Chris, your scene.
this is yours. Did you get the windows in the attic, Mitch?
I got them all, Mother.
When do you think they'll come?
I don't know.
If they are larger Swiss lodges, Mitch, they'll get into the house.
That's a chance we're going to have to take.
Maybe we ought to leave.
Not now. Not while they're massing out there.
When?
I don't know when. We'll see what...
Where will we go?
I don't know yet. I think we'll be safe here. Let's bring the wood in.
What happens when we run out of wood?
I don't know. We'll break up the furniture.
You don't know? You don't know? Well, when will you know? When we're all dead, like Annie?
Mother, I'm trying my best. I'm trying my...
I'm sorry, Mitch. And scene.
Oh, God. Sorry, I'm just crying here.
So the question is, which horror film do you think that is?
Oh, goodness. I have an inkling, but I'm not 100% certain. I've only seen this the once as well.
Okay.
So I'm going to say The Birds.
David, is The Birds correct?
Are the birds correct?
Is the film The Birds correct?
Yeah.
That was indeed Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds.
Yep.
Genuinely one of my favourite films because the effects have not aged well.
So Swiss Lodge took the place of large birds in that
Birds.
context.
It's amazing because when it comes to The Birds, I remember watching that for the first time, and have you seen the final sequence?
Yeah.
Referencing the attic. My bedroom was in the attic at the time, and honestly, at the time I was like, what if... Did I leave the window open? No. But different. Oh, God.
Yeah.
So it did actually end suddenly, slightly.
Oh, I can imagine. For me, the drama is when you see one of those birds like... "Ah!" It's like, oh, God.
Yeah.
So, Di, it's time for your film scene.
God, I can't wait for this. Hope it's a love scene.
I stand up for sense and justice. Our jails overflow with men and women convicted on confessions worth no more than this one.
Constable, this is a song we have heard from you more than once, but never before with this discordant accompaniment. I have 2 courses open to me. First, I can let you cool your heels in the cells until you learn respect in the dignity of my office.
I beg pardon, I only meant well. Why am I the only one who sees that to solve crimes, to detect the guilty, we must use our brains? To recognize vital clues using up-to-date scientific...
Which brings me to the second course. Constable Crane, there is a town upstate, 2 days. Journey to the north in the Hudson Highlands. It's a place called Swiss Lodge. Have you heard of it?
I have not.
An isolated farming community, mostly Dutch. 3 persons have been murdered there, all within a fortnight. Each found with their head lopped off.
Lopped off?
Clean as dandelion heads. Apparently, now, these ideas of yours, they have never been put to the test.
I have never been allowed to put them to the test.
Just so. Granted, so take your experimentations to Swiss Lodge and detect the murderer. Bring him here to face our good justice. Will you do this?
I shall, gladly.
And remember, it is you, Craig MacDonald, who is now put to the test. And
I
scene.
had no idea. What?
Chris knows it. Which film is
Just
that?
think about vital clues insofar as what's happening in the scene.
Yeah.
So they...
And
What's
what the crime
described.
is. Yeah.
Crime is people being decapitated in a village.
Yeah.
The village head...
The Village of the Damned.
The
No.
village of the decapitators.
Think specifically what's been cut off.
Heads. The demon headmaster.
Chris, you seem to know it. Would you like to say?
Sleepy Hollow.
It is indeed Sleepy Hollow.
Oh, I've not seen that.
Oh.
Yeah, so the name that we had to take out was Ichabod Crane. So,
I would
although
not
we did
have got
leave in,
that.
we
Yeah,
did
there
leave in
was
Crane.
a crane that snuck his way in there. So,
So-
but interestingly, did you know it without that in there?
Initially, I was like, "What is this?" And it was when you actually said a town called Swiss Lodge, and I went, "Hang on a minute."
Yeah.
That's not a town.
A town ahead of its time. Okay, so after 2 rounds, the score as it stands is Di is on 2 and Chris is on 3. Excellent. So at this point, we now return to the video clips.
So it's back to Chris now, to be
Yeah.
clear as well.
From the disorder, even if they are.
Take Carl, go to Mum's, kill Phil, sorry, grab Liz, go to the Winchester.
Oh, this is Shaun of the Dead.
And if you could do the voice, then.
Go to the Winchester, have a nice cold beer, and wait for all this to blow over.
Let's play it.
Have a nice cold pint and wait for all this to blow over.
It's a case of, yeah, I mean, the last absolute bit we were never going to quiz you on.
Oh, that was my
Saying
bad,
a
though.
beer versus pint, though, that's interesting.
Yeah.
But I think we will award you the points. And I also enjoyed your Simon Pegg impression, so thank you very much. So, yep, that's
Even
all.
I was a bit like, oh, I got it wrong.
So, I mean, that's fine if you want to let Di have the points.
No,
Anyway.
no.
So, Di, your next video.
Right.
If you're blue and you don't know where to go to, why don't you go where fashion sits?
From which film?
Young Frankenstein.
Yes. Clip, please.
Different types who wear a day coat.
Yeah,
pants with
all 3 points. I have to give all 3 points.
dressed up like a million.
Yeah, great rendition.
Yeah. I absolutely adore this sequence.
It's amazing.
Yeah, so fantastic. So now we go to the last of the scripts. So we're back to Chris.
All I know is that I got $1 million sitting in my lap.
Huh?
I'm going to market these things.
Oh, Christ, come on, Dad. That's...
Just imagine the excitement when word gets out. Everyone will want a Swiss lodge of their very own.
Don't you think we could have checked them out first just to make sure?
No, even if we want to make a big profit, we have to move fast. I have some investors coming to the house on Thursday. Who knows? Swiss lodge could replace dog as man's best friend.
So which film is this?
Swiss Lodge could replace Dog's best friend. Oh, man. This is really difficult. Oh, God. Gremlins?
Yeah, it's Gremlins.
I did think you'd get it there for
That was a tense moment.
Yeah.
But, yep, so that was indeed Gremlins.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so obviously Swiss lodge taking the place of the... What's the exact name of the species? It's not gremlins. It's the Mordecai.
Mogwais.
Mogwais. Mogwais,
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Cool.
Okay, so we go over to Di, and
His scene.
By the way,
here's
these
the
performances are incredible, and they're acting them out completely as well.
Yes,
Like
yeah.
it's
just
wait.
This is going to be the best performance. Okay.
Craig, stay away from me, please. Don't hurt me. Don't hurt me.
I'm not going to hurt you.
Stay away from me.
David.
Stay away.
David, light of my life, I'm not going to hurt you. You didn't let me finish my sentence. I said I'm not going to hurt you. I'm just going to bash your brains in. I'm going to bash the
Stay away from me. Stay away from me.
I'm not going to hurt you.
Stay away from me. Stay away from me, please.
Stop swinging the bat.
Stay away from me.
Put the bat down, David.
Stop it.
David, give me the bat.
Stay away.
Give me the bat.
Stay away from me.
Give me the bat.
Craig, stay away from me.
Stop swinging the bat.
Get down.
Give me the bat.
Get away from me.
David,
Go away.
give me the bat.
Go away.
Give me the bat.
And scene.
that's the best thing I've ever seen, and it's The Shining. Yeah,
it is indeed The Shining.
I want you now to do the entire movie.
Can I just say, obviously, guests have come on the show before and often noticed that David and I have a banterous / aggressive relationship from time to time. We weren't sure if you were going to just think that was like a regular conversation between us or not.
It basically is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you could genuinely replace the character The Shining with you two, and it would work.
Yeah,
But
Chris
you
only
need a
had
child.
Chris only had me giving him a lift here today. If it was me and Craig, he would have got a glimpse into that relationship from the get-go.
I almost wish you'd replace Bat with Swiss Lodge.
Yeah.
Give me the Swiss Lodge. Give me the Swiss Lodge.
All I think again is just the Simpsons go there. Give me the boo.
We did genuinely contemplate putting that scene in as one of the video clips, but once we actually physically found the transcript for this scene, we couldn't resist the urge to do this.
Fair enough.
So good.
Okay, so that's all we have time for the end game, but the final scores in the end, it was a close one. In the end, Di had 6, and our winner is Chris with 7.
Oh,
Congratulations, Chris.
Thank
Well
you.
done.
Well done, sir.
We shook hands.
Very close. So your winning music as all winners deserve.
God, I feel so bitter that I don't get winners, Nick. I've never felt worse.
You'll have another chance, Di. It's fine.
Your prize will be imminent, Chris. We shall decide it in the future, whether it be something like you choose a theme in the future, choose an end game, choose a name, like Matt got to choose the name for Swiss Lodge. We don't have too many characters running around though, so.
No.
But yes, you shall have your prize in the future. Wow. But thank you very much, guys, and well done. Thank you for speaking about horror films with us. Where can we catch you both? Plug some stuff: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Where do we find you?
Well, I'm on Facebook at C Maxwell, Christopher Maxwell, and I also work for a group called Dramatic Moose Productions. You can find us at Dramatic Moose Productions, and we do a lot of close stuff with the Watchers Productions as well.
Cool. And Di?
You can find me online. I run the Boxful comedy show in Cardiff, so anyone can find us on YouTube and Facebook and anything where you want to look and find things.
Cool. Yeah, and it's like Christmas is the next one, is it? Or like?
Yeah, potentially.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, thank you guys. If you've got your own opinions at home as to what you think should go into the movie vault, what your favourite classic horror films are the ones you want to see us talk about in the future, the ones you're disappointed we didn't get to cover off, then please do let us know. You can catch us at our sort of main site, which is freshtakehub.com. We're also on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook, Fresh Take Hub. And please review, rate this podcast, follow us, whether it be through iTunes, Spotify, Deezer. You can catch us on all the good podcast suppliers, so please do continue to support us, and it'd be much appreciated. Craig, any last notes from yourself?
Nope, just happy Halloween, everybody.
Listen to your thrillers and your Somebody's Watching Me and all those classic horror Halloween. Well, probably the most fit devour one would be the Monster Mash. So
You did the Monster Mash.
So thank you guys. We'll catch you on the next one, and keep talking movies. And as always, you can catch us on socials and on all your good podcast suppliers. Thank you guys. Catch you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.